Welcome to this explainer. If you've ever felt completely overwhelmed by the sheer volume of chess tricks out there, well, you are definitely in the right place. We're going to take a rapid-fire, kind of chaotic list of 30 different chess tactics and transform it into a highly structured, goal-oriented masterclass. We're organizing this arsenal so you can actually remember when, how, and exactly why to use these moves on the board to totally upgrade your game.
So, here's our roadmap. We'll be grouping these tactics by their ultimate strategic goals. We're starting with lures, traps, and diversions, then moving into ruthless material winners, board control and dominance, desperate saves, and endgames. And finally, the art of checkmate.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, lures, traps, and diversions. Basically, messing with your opponent's mind.
Now, tactics in this category are all about completely overwhelming your opponent's defensive structure. Take overloading, for example. You might spot a pawn that's desperately trying to defend two pieces at once. The second you capture one of them, that pawn has to move, which instantly leaves the other piece entirely undefended. Then there's deflection, where you force a piece away from a crucial duty. Imagine a black queen stubbornly defending the h7 square. If you intentionally sacrifice your rook just to force that queen to move, boom, you can deliver checkmate on the very next move. And finally, interference. This is exactly what it sounds like, rudely dropping one of your pieces right between an enemy and its defender, which usually leads to massive material loss.
Beyond simple distractions, you could actually set some pretty brutal traps. A decoy tactic, for instance, involves throwing out bait, like a sneaky pawn sacrifice, specifically to lure the enemy king out into the open where he can be ambushed. Then there's undermining, or removing the guard, which is incredibly effective. Let's say your opponent has a knight defending against a mate on g7. Well, you simply capture the knight, remove the guard, and proceed with your attack. Oh, and we absolutely can't forget the swish and sook. It's this brilliant in-between move where you insert a total surprise into a totally predictable sequence, and it just completely derails your opponent's plans.
Moving into the mid-game now, with Section 2, Ruthless Material Winners. This is all about stealing pieces with absolute precision.
This brings us to two concepts that are super easy to confuse, the pin and the skewer. So, a pin completely immobilizes a piece. Moving it would expose a highly valuable piece hiding behind it, right? It's an incredible tool. A skewer, however, works in exact reverse. The more valuable piece is actually the one sitting right in front. It gets attacked, it's forced to run away, and by doing so, it tragically leaves the weaker, less valuable piece behind completely exposed to capture.
To really wrap your head around the skewer, imagine this sort of hilarious but brutal dynamic. The king gets put in check, is forced to cowardly step aside, and helplessly leaves his precious queen behind to be captured. It's a harsh reality of the board, but man, is it highly effective for the attacker.
Now, these multi-attacks, they are absolutely devastating, mostly because they force your opponent to make impossible choices. Imagine a fork, where you place a single knight perfectly to attack two enemy rooks at the exact same time. It's basically a guaranteed material advantage. Or consider a discovered attack, where moving your knight to attack a rook simultaneously uncovers a hidden check from another piece. The king has to move, and the rook is instantly lost. We also have the X-ray, where you indirectly attack right through an opponent's piece. If you attack a bishop twice through an intervening piece, you can capture it knowing that if the opponent's queen recaptures, she's toast.
That highly dramatic, if I'm going down, you're going down with me mindset, that belongs to the desperado. A desperado piece is one that's already totally trapped and doomed to be captured, but instead of just rolling over and giving up, it seeks to inflict maximum damage before it gets taken off the board. Basically, if your knight is trapped anyway, it might as well violently grab an enemy pawn on its way out.
All right, having secured our material, we're aiming for spatial dominance in Section 3, Board Control and Dominance. It's time to dictate the flow of the game.
A truly perfect example of spatial dominance is the clearance sequence. Look, sometimes your own pieces are just in your way. Say you have a knight that would absolutely love to jump to the e6 square to deliver a massive fork, but your own queen is just sitting right there. In a clearance sacrifice, you intentionally sacrifice that queen, moving her away just to open up the space, and then jump your knight into the newly cleared square to finish the job.
Board control is literally all about dominating the space. You can exert overwhelming pressure in the opponent's camp by placing your rooks on the 7th rank, where they can just gobble up pawns, coordinate together, and completely cut off the enemy king. You can also form a battery, aligning 2 or more pieces on the same file or diagonal to put intense pressure on a single specific square. And, of course, you should always keep an eye out for a weak back rank to exploit for a sudden, massive material advantage.
As the board starts to clear, the game drastically shifts. Welcome to Section 4, Desperate Saves and Endgames, Surviving and Closing It Out.
In the endgame, those humble little pawns become absolute fatal weapons. You can use a pawn breakthrough, literally sacrificing your own pawns or pieces just to clear a path and create one unstoppable passed pawn that just marches to the end of the board. Passed pawns are lethal in open endgames, but when they actually reach the end, you don't always want a queen. Under promotion is a brilliant tactic, where you promote to a knight, bishop, or rook specifically to avoid accidentally stalemating your opponent or maybe to achieve a really tricky tactical check. And hey, don't forget en passant, that sneaky special capture when a pawn moves 2 squares forward and lands right beside yours.
So, the crucial point of this next tactic, simplification, is really all about risk management. When you secure a comfortable lead in material, honestly, the smartest thing you can do is intentionally trade down. Why? Well, because knights can be tricky, especially when you're in time trouble. By exchanging pieces and removing all that complexity, you don't have to constantly watch out for potential forks, and you just convert the game into a very easy mechanical endgame win that doesn't really require much thinking.
But wait, what if you're the one losing? When all hope seems lost, you can still claw your way back. You can launch a counter threat. If they attack your rook, you immediately counter by attacking their king. Or if you're behind on material, you might be able to force a draw through perpetual check, where the king simply cannot escape continuous checks. Alternatively, you aim for a miraculous stalemate. Actually, there's this famous game from 1880 where a player was down 5 points of material. Realizing his king had nowhere to move, he sacrificed his own queen. Since he wasn't in check but had no legal moves left, the game instantly ended in a brilliant stalemate draw. No way, right?
This brings us to an incredibly powerful German concept, Zugzwang. This is the ultimate strategic dilemma. It's a situation where literally any move the opponent makes is going to worsen their position. Imagine a setup where you play a brilliant sacrifice, like rook to a6. The opponent is left with only 2 legal moves on the entire board, and taking the rook leads to checkmate in one, while moving their bishop leads to checkmate in a completely different way. They are forced to move and therefore forced to lose.
We finally reached Phase 5, the art of checkmate, finishing the fight. Setting up the final blow very often requires grand, dramatic gestures. We are talking about the ultimate sacrifice, intentionally giving up massive amounts of material for a game-ending goal, kind of like Paul Morphy's stunning queen sacrifice to deliver a checkmate with rook to d8. You also have the double check, where you hit the king with 2 pieces in a single move. Because 2 pieces are attacking at the exact same time, you can't block it and you can't capture both. The opponent's only legal option is to run their king. Once the king is vulnerable, you can completely dismantle the opponent with the windmill. This is a devastating, honestly almost theatrical sequence that usually involves a rook and a bishop. The rook just swings back and forth, delivering checks, stepping away, and violently capturing material on every single swing. It's a game-ending sequence that leaves the opponent's side of the board completely empty. To guarantee the win, you want to trap the enemy king in a mating net. By carefully restricting the king's movement and guarding their escape squares, you're basically creating a cage. You make it so heavily restricted that bringing in just one more piece, like dropping a rook or a knight onto a specific square, leads to a mathematically inevitable checkmate.
And finally, we have smothering. This is perhaps the most claustrophobic tactic in all of chess. You intentionally sacrifice material specifically to force the opponent's own pieces to move into squares right next to their king, literally trapping him behind his own defenses.
Just imagine the sheer panic of a smothered king. You are completely boxed in, suffocated by the very pieces meant to protect you, unable to move a single inch, as the final checkmate is delivered by an enemy knight. It's brutal. So we've just turned a chaotic, overwhelming list of 30 concepts into a highly structured, absolutely deadly arsenal. From early game diversions and traps to ruthless mid-game skewers, all the way to positional dominance, endgame survival, and the beautiful art of checkmate. The only provocative question left to ask is, out of all these master tactics, which one are you going to deploy on the board in your very next game?